In a world where charm can conceal a predatory nature, understanding the subtleties of manipulation becomes not just an advantage, but a necessity for survival. Truth Unveiled is not merely a communication guide. It plunges you into the labyrinth of Machiavellian tactics that masquerade as benign interactions, but serve as tools for control and deceit. Each chapter unfurls the cloaks of illusion, urging you to awaken to the truths veiled beneath layers of charisma and cunning. As you delve deeper, you'll learn to fortify your emotional strength and reclaim your autonomy amidst the shadows of manipulation. Prepare to embrace the discomfort of enlightenment, for every revelation holds the key to your personal emancipation. Truth Unveiled, Exposing Machiavellian Manipulators in Life, written and published by Stealth Psychology. Chapter 1. Unmasking the Hidden Charm. Imagine stepping into a bustling cafe where laughter mingles with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee. At a corner table, a charismatic figure captures the attention of everyone around. This individual has an unassuming charm that makes their words shimmer with allure, creating an atmosphere that feels almost magnetic. Yet, beneath this enchanting exterior lurks a darker intention. A meticulous architect of manipulation who thrives on emotional control, seeking to ensnare unsuspecting victims in a web of deceit. Initially, their harmless banter and genuine smile may seem inviting, but it becomes apparent that this facade is a calculated facade designed to exploit vulnerabilities. Such manipulators skillfully craft narratives that ensnare their targets. They are well versed in identifying emotions, desires, and fears, exploiting them to keep individuals tethered to their whims. Consider the young professional who, after a few casual conversations, finds themselves sharing intimate details of their life with this charming stranger, unaware that they are being drawn into a cycle of dependency. Over time, they begin to heed the manipulator's advice more than their own instincts, creating an imbalance where emotional control replaces autonomy. They often dismiss subtle red flags, microaggressions mixed with compliments and praise disguised with underlying contempt, until the trap is fully set. Victims, caught in the throes of charm, often struggle to disentangle themselves from the manipulator's grasp. They marvel at the moments of kindness, convinced that their manipulator means well. They fail to see that kindness laced with ulterior motives is a potent weapon. These delicate gestures are merely designed to strengthen the emotional bonds, locking the victim deeper into compliance. Absorbed in the psychological dynamics, they often succumb to gaslighting and manipulation, slowly losing sight of their identity and values. Friends may express concern when they notice unsettling changes in behavior, but the manipulators have a keen knack for isolating individuals from their support systems, dubbing those concerned friends as toxic or jealous for their skepticism. The ultimate goal of these skilled manipulators transcends mere social interaction. It encompasses emotional exploitation, financial control, and above all, the erosion of self-esteem. An individual may follow the progression of manipulation with greater awareness, deciding to excuse the controlling behavior time and time again, feeling justified by the fleeting warmth of genuine connection, unaware that compliance weakens them. The cunning nature of these manipulators makes them adept at twisting truths and narrating stories that paint themselves as martyrs or victims, each deftly deflecting blame while fostering guilt in their chosen targets. This chapter serves as a crucial unveiling, shedding light on a truth many prefer to avoid. The seductive allure of charm may provide a brief sense of safety, yet it often masks intentions dripping with manipulation. Recognizing this phenomenon requires an honest appraisal of interactions, questioning a connection's authenticity, and peeling back the layers of behavior. Journeying into the depths of this psychological paradigm is essential. It is a path toward understanding the mechanisms behind emotional entrapment and equipping oneself to reclaim agency. Only through this awareness can one hope to reclaim their power and emerge from the shadows cast by those who wield charm with the intent to control. Psychological manipulation is a complex interplay between charm and control that profoundly affects emotions, decision-making, relationships, and self-esteem. When individuals find themselves in the thrall of a manipulator, their emotional landscape shifts dramatically. Emotions become weapons, with charm and charisma acting as puppeteers that subtly dictate thoughts and feelings. Victims often report experiencing swings between elation and despair, where moments of perceived affection are interspersed with emotional withdrawals and criticism, creating an insatiable hunger for approval. This cycle not only manipulates their emotions, but also distorts their perceptions of reality, compelling them to question their worthiness and instincts. Studies in psychology underline this emotional manipulation. Research conducted by Dr. Elizabeth S. Lombardo reveals that high charm combined with erratic emotional behaviors can convince victims to relinquish their decision-making power, leading to a painful misalignment between their values and their actions. Many individuals, eager for validation and connection, overlook harmful behaviors in hope of maintaining the vision of a loving relationship, which ultimately proves damaging. As well-meaning friends attempt to intervene, manipulators deftly exploit existing emotions, casting doubt on the ulterior motives of those well-intentioned allies. This, in turn, fosters isolation and intensifies reliance on the manipulator. The impact on relationships is another instrumental aspect of manipulation, particularly as they unravel bonds with others. Victims often find themselves torn between feelings of love for the manipulator and suspicion of their intentions, resulting in complex, damaging attachments that are exhausting to sustain. For example, a recent case study highlighted the relationship of Sarah, whose partner, John, maintained a facade of affection but frequently belittled her achievements. When Sarah pursued personal interests independent of him, John's manipulation escalated. He painted them as threats to their relationship's stability, further binding Sarah's sense of self to his approval. The manipulation snowballed, ensnaring Sarah in a cycle of self-doubt that led to compromised relationships with friends and family, who became secondary to John's need for control. Self-esteem is also a major casualty of this psychological warfare. As the cycle progresses, victims start to absorb the manipulator's narratives, gradually eroding their self-value and reinforcing misguided beliefs about their capabilities. Research led by Dr. Brené Brown emphasizes the link between vulnerability and shame, illustrating how emotional manipulation exploits these sentiments. Over time, the victim perceives themselves through the distorting lens created by the manipulator, deeply entrenching a toxic identity. Their once secure beliefs are overshadowed by doubt, rendering them prone to compliance and obedience, distancing themselves from their inherent strengths and convictions. Understanding why people fall prey to such manipulation is crucial for self-preservation. Many are conditioned to believe that charm equates to authenticity and goodwill. The allure of affection can cloud judgment, lulling victims into complacency. Psychological experiments such as the Milgram experiment on obedience underscore humanity's proclivity to yield to authority, even when it conflicts with personal ethics. Similarly, manipulators leverage societal expectations and ingrained desires for connection, positioning themselves as trusted scholars of the victim's psyche, capable of wielding control under the guise of love. As alluring as it may seem, recognizing these manipulative strategies is imperative for anyone who wishes to navigate the complex landscape of relationships. The urgency to learn and defend against such tactics cannot be overstated. By uncovering their influence and understanding their mechanisms, individuals can build defenses against emotional entrapment and reclaim their autonomy. The following section will delve into the hidden warning signs often overlooked, equipping readers with tools to recognize real danger amidst charm's deceptive allure. Manipulators are adept at identifying targets, using subtle yet effective tactics to exploit emotional vulnerabilities. They survey their surroundings, keenly observing individuals for signs of insecurity or neediness, scanning for weaknesses that can be skillfully navigated to establish dominance. A fundamental strategy they employ is to engage in active listening, making the targeted individual feel appreciated and understood, a gateway to trust. For instance, consider an example of a workplace scenario where a seemingly harmless colleague takes a particular interest in a new employee's aspirations. Through casual conversations, the manipulator gains insight into the newcomer's dreams and insecurities, offering flattery and encouragement initially to create a bond. Once sufficient trust is established, they often pivot to an agenda, subtly guiding the new hire to prioritize the manipulator's ambitions over their own, eroding the target's assertiveness and further entrenching them in a cycle of compliance. The charm displayed by manipulators is opportunistic, often intensified in tensions or drastic changes in the target's life. Take the case of Emily, who, after moving to a new city, found solace in the friendship of a charismatic neighbor. This new friend provided an emotional anchor, offering companionship during a physically and emotionally tumultuous transition. However, over time, subtle shifts became apparent. Under the guise of concern, the so-called friend began to criticize Emily's choices and attempt to isolate her from other potential friends. These shifts often mask manipulative tactics aimed at controlling the target's connections and burgeoning independence. Critical parsing of this scenario reveals that manipulators are attuned to societal and relational contexts and utilize those dynamics to create dependency. Psychological shifts occur remarkably subtly and often without the victim's realization. Initially, a targeted individual feels validated in their choices, buoyed by the manipulator's praise. Gradually, noise begins. Flattery is replaced with criticisms, and unsolicited advice seeped in affection. This dichotomy leads to confusion, causing the target to question their self-worth and instincts, perceiving emotional volatility as normalcy. In turn, the dynamic skews toward compliance, as the deep-seated fear of loss or lack of validation reinforces continued submission to the manipulator's whims. A poignant example lies in the story of Marcus, a once confident artist whose passion for his craft was stifled by a controlling partner. Initially, praise for his creative endeavors turned to backhanded remarks, framing creativity as impractical. This gradual infantilization led Marcus to internalize the belief of his inadequacies, effectively undermining his artistic aspirations and smothering his sense of individuality. Recognition of these patterns requires acute awareness and mindfulness of emotional shifts in yourself and your interpersonal relationships. Often, the most insidious aspect of manipulation is the normalization of toxic dynamics, which erode one's standards of acceptable behavior. Identifying a pattern in these interactions can be the difference between maintaining one's autonomy or succumbing to emotional exploitation. Manipulators thrive in enabling atmospheres of deceit and subterfuge, consequently escalating their influence while blurring the lines of trust and dependency. Understanding the mechanisms of manipulation is the crucial first step toward resistance and defiance against psychological encroachment. Arming oneself with this knowledge enables you to counteract tactics before they entrench themselves, securing emotional autonomy as a protective barrier. Grasping these patterns also prepares you for the next exploration, an examination of the escalation of control and how individuals slowly but inevitably find themselves ensnared in a web crafted by skillful maneuvering. Chapter 2. Trusting your inner voice. Picture yourself in a crowded room, laughter spilling from every corner, yet feeling an inexplicable pull toward one person, someone whose charisma commands attention and whose words resonate deeply within you. This engaging presence appears genuinely interested in your thoughts and aspirations, making you feel seen and understood in a way that few have before. However, as time unfolds, it becomes clear that this façade is more than mere charm. It's a calculated design woven to manipulate emotions and control perspectives. The manipulator's ultimate goal often revolves around compliance, creating a landscape where personal opinions and instincts are overshadowed by their visions. Many, entranced by the initial warmth, remain blissfully unaware of the emotional trap tightening around them until it becomes a suffocating reality. As enticing connection morphs subtly into a form of control, the victim's inner voice may increasingly echo with doubt, eroded by the manipulator's persuasive tactics. They present themselves as a kind of guide. With each interaction, this mentor offers validations and insights into the victim's life choices. In stark contrast, dissenting thoughts or contradictory experiences are dismissed as insignificant or misplaced. Individuals eager for approval start to silence their instincts. Consider the case of Maya, whose coworkers initially celebrated her unique ideas. Enter Caleb, the charismatic team lead who gradually capitalized on Maya's creativity, introducing her to selections of his vision and discouraging deviations from it. Over time, Maya's inner voice dulled. Compliance replaced her innovative spark while she struggled to remember her original intentions. Victims often find themselves living on a tightrope between admiration for the manipulator's perceived wisdom and the quiet unraveling of their autonomy. They frequently laugh off moments of discomfort, reframing manipulation as an expression of deep concern or friendship, which only induces deeper entanglement. Psychologists frequently underscore how pervasive this phenomenon is. The propensity to favor relationship cohesion can blind individuals to emotionally unhealthy dynamics taking shape. This blindness fosters a toxic environment where the haven is defined by the manipulator's influence and any dissent viewed tragically as cardinal disloyalty. The dynamics of power shift subtly during these interactions. At first glance, the manipulators seem compassionate, yet their pretense of support is shrouded in pivotal, covert maneuvers meant to destabilize confidence. They employ flattery tinged with conditionality, praising a competitor while tearing down plans and ideas. Hannah's experiences amplify this. Her supportive communication with a close friend turned into shadowed critiques of her social initiatives. This entanglement led Hannah to withdrawal, neglecting projects rooted in her passions and playing into her friend's offensive narrative. Curiously, emotional validation from the manipulator built on the salt of neglect often calls the victims to loyalty that stings yet becomes addictive. Dismantling manipulation requires a conscious effort to tune back into that inner voice, that intuitive sense often clouded under the weight of relationship dynamics. Trusting one's instincts is crucial for discerning manipulation, allowing victims the clarity needed to reject what may appear to be affectionate, yet is ultimately coercive. It isn't just about recognizing the manipulative tactics as they unfold. It's about empowering oneself to reclaim trust in their perspective and judgments. As you move forward, remember the importance of fostering this self-awareness in a world sometimes filled with charm, deceptive enough to mask more grievous intentions. By reclaiming the innate ability to listen to your inner voice, you enable yourself to develop clarity and confidence in your decisions. The next section will delve deeper into the perils of complacency, the internal battles faced, and how easy it becomes to stay ensnared, reminding you that vigilance and self-trust are paramount in wading through a landscape rife with manipulation. Psychological manipulation weaves an intricate tapestry that dramatically affects emotions, decision-making, relationships, and self-esteem. One of the most immediate consequences lies in the emotional instability that arises when a victim begins to prioritize the manipulator's desires over their own feelings. Initially, the attention and admiration from the manipulator can provide a euphoric sense of validation. However, the patterns that emerge soon plunge the victim into an emotional whirlwind filled with uncertainty and dependency. For instance, Alex was a young entrepreneur whose innovative ideas drew attention. Enter Ella, a charming mentor figure who encouraged Alex, generating excitement about his potential. As their relationship deepened, Alex found himself accepting Ella's critiques without question. Gradually, the guiding critiques morphed into harsh judgments, leading Alex to internalize constant self-doubt. His passion for his work dimmed, overtaken by a pressing need for Ella's approval, a textbook manifestation of emotional manipulation. This turmoil infiltrates decision-making processes, causing the target to second-guess their choices and surrender autonomy in dire ways. As trust in one's judgment erodes, decisions begin to reflect the might of the manipulator instead of personal aspirations. Critical thinking skills are dulled, and individuals find themselves evaluating their choices through the lens of the manipulator's approval. Dr. Robert Cialdini's research on influence and persuasion emphasizes that this dependency on external validation leaves individuals susceptible to a barrage of manipulative assertions, causing them to rationalize poor decisions that, under clearer circumstances, would likely raise red flags. The implications extend profoundly into personal and professional relationships as well. Manipulators excel at sowing seeds of discord, fragmenting the connections between potential allies and reducing the support networks that typically serve as protective barriers. When Emma began dating Paul, she was overjoyed to have someone who listened and supported her dreams. However, as their relationship progressed, Paul's interest waned and his desire for control surged. Friends who once encouraged Emma were painted as negative influences, manipulated into disdain by Paul's assertions of devotion. This redundancy is a defining feature of manipulation, turning friends into foes, thereby increasing the victim's psychological dependence on the manipulator. The emotional toll of being torn between love for the manipulative partner and concern for floundering relationships significantly contributes to the deterioration of self-esteem. Why do individuals continue to fall for these tactics, even when the damage becomes apparent? Unpacking this begins with understanding the human condition, the intrinsic desire for belonging, validation, and affection. Psychological research suggests that humans naturally seek connection and support, leading many to overlook incongruities in a relationship for fear of solitude. The phenomenon of cognitive dissonance can complicate this further. It instills a reluctance to abandon a connection once initiated, prompting an adherence to the status quo, even if detrimental. Multiple studies have demonstrated that once bonds are formed, individuals are prone to invest more heavily into encounters, irrespective of growing apprehensions and doubt, and are willing to minimize adverse behaviors in order to maintain the relationship. As this section concludes, understanding the emotional, cognitive, and relational ramifications is crucial for recognizing when manipulation begins to taint an otherwise promising connection. The complexity of these dynamics grounds the call for vigilance in tapping into one's own voice and values amidst manipulative tactics. The impending discussion will explore the warning signs that often remain in the background of such relationships, providing practical insights for the discerning individual equipped to navigate the intricacies of emotional manipulation. Awareness can set the stage for reclaiming autonomy before becoming ensnared, granting readers the pivotal tools needed for self-advocacy and emotional resilience. Manipulators possess an uncanny ability to identify their targets, employing astute observations and psychological cues that often elude the average person's awareness. The search for vulnerable individuals is not merely happenstance. It is a calculated endeavor designed to exploit insecurities and emotional needs. Victims are frequently those who exhibit signs of self-doubt, a yearning for approval, or a distrust in their own judgment. For instance, a scenario involving Jenna, a dedicated employee looking to advance her career, can illuminate how manipulators engage with their targets. Jenna's eagerness to please was evident both in her compact demeanor and her deferential interactions. Lee, a seasoned colleague, quickly recognized these traits and subtly reinforced Jenna's self-doubt through backhanded compliments and inflated praise of her efforts, while deftly diverting credit to himself. As the contributions of others diminished in Jenna's mind, she began to rely solely on Lee's approval, amplifying his control over her professional aspirations. As manipulators establish their foothold, subtle psychological shifts fracture the target's perception of reality. Initially, victims may experience a surge of gratitude, buoyed by seeming kindness and mentorship. Yet as time passes, the manipulative power dynamics shift imperceptibly, taking root in everyday interactions. Imagine Jenna again, receiving contradictory feedback from Lee, encouragement paired with relentless critical comments about decisions that seemed innocuous at first glance. Each interaction leaves Jenna confusion, oscillating between fleeting moments of praise and a prevailing sense of inadequacy. The human mind, instinctively geared toward maintaining harmony, tends to excuse erratic behavior. Eventually, these dynamics render the target conditioned to seek validation from the very person instilling doubt, thereby establishing a dependency that restricts personal growth and bursts of independence. The unique capacity of manipulators to reinforce such control arose from prolonged and intentional engagement delivered under the guise of camaraderie. This gradual erosion manifests in decision-making too. For instance, consider individual patterns that reflect a cycle of justifications patients may face. Jenna, now questioning both her skills and competence, begins to second-guess choices she would have previously made without hesitation. The more she yields to Lee's perspective, the more her internal compass falters. Each time Jenna disregards her instincts, she creates the illusion of safety while cementing submission. This pattern can be observed in many, compulsively validating a manipulator's worldview until the victim is entrapped in a cycle of compliance and disappointment. Understanding these psychological tactics and shifts is critical for self-defense. Recognizing how manipulators identify targets and exploit vulnerabilities provides the groundwork necessary to fend off undue influence. Engaging in self-reflection and emotional check-ins can help differentiate genuine concern from coercive pleasantries cloaked in affection. Identifying their methods enables victims to reclaim agency over their reactions and decisions. As the groundwork lays for more significant discussions, it becomes vital to understand that awareness is powerful. It is the shield that must precede action, allowing one to navigate damaging relational waters. Manipulators thrive on secrecy, silencing one's inner voice while shrouding their true intentions. As this exploration progresses, the next section will tackle the escalation of control, detailing how these seductions evolve into cycles of entrapment, making it imperative to discern the darkest recesses of manipulation. Maintaining vigilance through self-awareness and fostering boundaries is crucial. Each revelation builds resilience and protects one's autonomy in a world rife with charades. Chapter 3: Breaking the Cycle of Deceit. Imagine a once thriving social life slowly folding into a shadowy existence where numerous connections fade into silence. Sarah, a bright college student, seemed to have the world at her fingertips, well-liked and admired for her achievements. However, everything changed when she met Marcus, an older student with magnetic charm and apparent sophistication. At first glance, Marcus swept Sarah off her feet, a whirlwind romance that was punctuated by declarations of love and promises of a shared future. Yet beneath this seemingly intoxicating exterior lay a more sinister design. Marcus's ultimate goal was emotional control, aiming to isolate Sarah from her friends and family, thereby weaving a thick veil of dependence. Initially, the charm obscured the insidiousness of Marcus's intentions. Eager to build their relationship on what seemed like mutual affection, Sarah fails to see the gradual infiltration of manipulation that follows. When her friends voiced concerns about how much time Marcus monopolized, Sarah brushed off their warnings, convinced that they just didn't understand the depth of her connection. This mindset exemplifies a tragic reality: the unfortunate tendency for victims to ignore glaring signs, tethering themselves to the paralyzing grip of romantic manipulation. Emotionally entrapped, Sarah began to perceive her joy through the filter of Marcus's presence, while her sense of autonomy slipped quietly away. The psychological decoys deployed by manipulators are deftly disguised. They thrive on fostering scenarios that cultivate a sense of crisis and dependency. Soon, Marcus began to identify and exploit Sarah's vulnerabilities, questioning her decisions, criticizing her social interactions, and subtly suggesting that her friendships detracted from her loyalty to him. As Sarah's world shrank, she grew eerily accustomed to the growing isolation, confusing confinement for safety, and painting each aberration as a testament to Marcus's deep care. This confusing dynamic underscores a critical lesson. Emotional manipulation thrives in confusion and uncertainty, sucking the vibrancy out of genuine relationships. Victims like Sarah often struggle to disentangle their feelings from the manipulator's crafted narrative. Gradually, they become fine-tuned to compliance, filtering their emotions through a lens of external validation that bolsters the manipulator's hold. The cycle reaches an alarming depth when individuals start making decisions that align solely with the expectations set by their partner, regardless of personal beliefs or values. The bright ambitions and authenticity that once grounded them begin to dissipate under the weight of enforced compatibility. Compelled by a misguided sense of loyalty, victims continue harboring hope for redemption, an eventual return to the authentic colors of love they once embodied. Recognizing the destructive radius of deceit is just the first step toward breaking free from the cycle of manipulation. As deceptive patterns solidify and expand their influence, the urgent need for self-reflection grows ever more critical. The layers of emotional control wrap tighter around the victim's self-perception, rendering clarity elusive, Yet understanding these mechanisms of manipulation becomes essential for liberation. The pathways out of entrapment begin with recognizing dissonance in one's reality. By confronting those ingrained perspectives, individuals can start ascending toward resilience and autonomy. Hurdles remain, but with the deliberate act of trusting one's instincts and valuing authentic connections, reclaiming agency becomes possible. Armed with awareness, victims begin dismantling the deceit while illuminating paths to personal freedom. The journey through manipulation reveals that the resilience born from reflection is profound. In the next segment, we will delve deeper into the manifestations of emotional control, equipping you with knowledge and insight to identify and confront the early warning signs of encroaching deceit. The exploration will guide you toward the empowered decision to reclaim your life and relationships. The effects of psychological manipulation permeate all aspects of a victim's life, influencing emotions, decision-making, relationships, and self-esteem in ways that often go unnoticed until the damage becomes profound. One of the most immediate impacts is the distortion of the victim's emotional landscape. As in the case of Sarah, whose luminous personality dimmed under Marcus's overwhelming influence, victims frequently find themselves grappling with feelings of confusion, anxiety, and self-doubt. The initial joy of falling in love can quickly succumb to emotional turmoil as the manipulator's harsh criticisms and erratic behavior take precedence over genuine emotional support. This relentless cycle cultivates a fertile ground for emotional insecurity, leading individuals to repeatedly question their worth and ability to maintain relationships. Decision-making becomes a perilous form of self-subjugation as victims relinquish control over their lives. Influenced by their manipulators, individuals may begin processing decisions solely through the lens of what they believe to be acceptable to their controlling partner. Consider the research by psychologist Dr. Judith Herman, which underscores the effects of trauma and manipulation on cognitive functioning. The constant cycle of emotional highs and lows can leave victims in a state of hypervigilance, perpetually anticipating their partner's reactions and tailoring their choices to avoid conflict. For Sarah, this meant abandoning personal aspirations in favor of conforming to Marcus's expectations. Over time, decisions once grounded in her goals became heavily influenced by a desperate need for acceptance and love, creating a disconnect from her true desires. Manipulation also engenders deep rifts in relationships with others. The chosen isolation placed on the victim means that friends and family members become casualties of manipulation, unable to provide necessary perspectives or support. Deliberately, manipulators will paint the victim's support network as toxic influences, leveraging the victim's insecurities to intrude upon previously strong connections. Sarah's friendships waned as Marcus continued to stoke fears that her friends were jealous or rebuked her dreams, ultimately fracturing her external support and reinforcing her dependency on him. When relying solely on the manipulator for emotional support, victims inadvertently entangle themselves deeper into a tenuous existence, losing sight of dependable relationships that once offered solace. The crux of why individuals fall prey to such manipulative tactics revolves around their deep-seated desires for validation and connection. Psychological insights reveal that individuals, especially those with prior traumas or low self-esteem, often struggle under the weight of emotional abandonment. The allure of unconditional love from a partner can cement blind loyalty toward a manipulative figure, obscuring unfavorable traits until the relationship becomes a prison. The thrill of romance blends seamlessly with a hunger for approval, such that the victim clings to fleeting moments of kindness as a lifeline, rationalizing uncharacteristic behaviors and embarking on quests for the manipulator's acknowledgement. Understanding the far-reaching consequences of this emotional degradation necessitates urgency. Without vigilance, one can easily slip into a cycle of deceit. Recognizing these patterns marks the critical juncture where self-advocacy begins. Awareness empowers victims to step back and evaluate their relationships from an informed standpoint, grounded in reality. Maintaining a focus on genuine interactions and fostering healthy support systems can serve as a crucial buoy when battling against manipulation. As we progress, it becomes vital to delve deeper into identifying the signs of emotional manipulation that often hide in plain sight. Understanding these hidden warning signs can arm individuals to confront unhealthy dynamics proactively. The awareness developed along this journey sets the stage for resistance, enabling victims to fortify their resolve and build back a life that holds space for authentic connections and personal aspirations. In the following section, we will explore ways to recognize these signals of manipulation, illuminating a path toward reclaiming autonomy and self-worth that may have been lost in the shadows. Manipulators possess a finely tuned ability to identify their targets through careful observation, exploiting vulnerabilities that often lie just beneath the surface. These individuals can read social dynamics like a well-versed chart, zeroing in on those who display signs of insecurity or a deep longing for affirmation. For instance, consider the story of Tom, a young professional who recently went through a painful divorce and was trying to rebuild his life. Andy, a colleague with an assertive demeanor wrapped in charm, recognized Tom's need for companionship and subtly positioned herself as a solid support system. At first, Tom felt grateful for her attentiveness, believing that someone finally understood his pain. Yet, unbeknownst to him, this connection was being manipulated from the outset, with Andy keenly aware of Tom's vulnerabilities and adeptly leveraging them to her advantage. Over time, the tactical application of manipulation revealed itself in the intricate web of their interactions. While Andy continued to shower Tom with compliments, her affirmations were often undercut by pointed critiques disguised as sound advice. A clear pattern surfaced. Each time Tom received praise, it would be swiftly followed by a comment insinuating he needed to improve in other areas, planting seeds of doubt regarding his worth and decision-making. As Tom began to doubt himself, the emotional shifts solidified his dependency on Andy as both a confidant and an authority figure, demonstrating a dangerous psychological turn. The moment one is ensnared, minute shifts in perception begin to intertwine, subtly bending the individual's reality. Tom's burgeoning reliance typified the sinister layers of deceit that begin to accumulate. Initial thoughts of gratitude and safety morphed into confusion and an overwhelming desire to please Andy, leading to avoidant behaviors, self-censorship, and an absence of personal boundaries. Victims may feel a sense of urgency to continually meet expectations as they unwittingly relinquish their autonomy, providing manipulators with increasing levels of emotional control, wrapped in a reliance on manufactured praise. This manipulation does not just serve to undermine the victim's self-worth, but also facilitates a form of isolation among support networks. Much like Tom's experience led him to drift away from his friends, who noticed the discrepancies and attempted to discourage Andy's influence, many manipulators exploit such vulnerabilities by undermining relationships that threaten their grasp. The friendships that once provided nourishment and joy can begin to dissolve, replaced by strained interactions layered with suspicion and guilt, perpetuated through the script written by the manipulator. Understanding how manipulators identify and target specific individuals is integral for resistance and self-defense. Recognizing your intrinsic worth and the energy you bring to interpersonal dynamics is crucial in dissipating the cloaks of deception before they ensnare you. Lashed to vulnerability, individuals must cultivate the awareness necessary to break free, remaining self-vigilant in the presence of those whose charm feels conditioned by ulterior motives. Awareness is the precursor to empowerment, acting as a safeguard against emotional erosion. Chapter 3 underscores that self-awareness serves not only to thwart manipulation, but also to reinforce one's core relationships. In recognizing these psychological patterns and the intricate ways manipulation flows through social exchanges, readers equip themselves with the insight necessary to navigate the treacherous waters of deceitfully charming tongues. As we transition, the subsequent section will delve into the escalation of control. We will examine how isolated victims become further entrapped in cycles that tighten the grip of manipulation. Addressing the dynamics of these cycles will provide invaluable insight into spotting potential traps and reclaiming autonomy before losing secure footing entirely. Awareness of such intricacies allows one to step confidently out of manipulation's grasp, seeking connections fortified by genuine authenticity rather than deceptive allure. Chapter 4: Building Resilience Against Manipulation. Picture Charlotte, a talented graphic designer, initially brimming with creative energy and passion. Her life spirals when she becomes entangled with Jake, a fellow designer who exudes confidence and charm, easily winning her trust through flattery and shared dreams. But behind this facade lies Jake's ultimate goal: emotional control. He skillfully begins to critique her work, regularly overshadowing Charlotte's capabilities with his own opinions, subtly shaping her artistic vision into a pale reflection of his preferences. While the initial praise made her feel seen and appreciated, it soon becomes apparent that Jake's validation comes at a steep price: Charlotte's self-esteem. Initially oblivious to this slow, corrosive erosion, Charlotte immerses herself in Jake's world. The compliments and constructive criticism gradually transform into a pattern of dependency as Jake criticizes her designs, portraying them as flawed and unoriginal. Under this psychological manipulation, Charlotte's brush with creativity metamorphoses into a battle against self-doubt and a disheartening cycle of compliance. The worst part is that she fails to recognize the full extent of her entrapment until she finds herself devoid of her distinct voice and artistic identity, suffocated under the weight of Jake's expectations. The reality of emotional manipulation often catches victims unaware, unfolding gradually in seemingly innocuous exchanges. The manipulator fosters an environment of confusion and dependency, casting an incessant shadow of doubt that skews the victim's perception of their capabilities. Charlotte's initial trust in Jake rapidly became her undoing, weakening her resolve and tarnishing her belief in her creative prowess. As Charlotte shifts the lens through which she views her artistic career, her focus shifts from genuine expression to endless attempts to craft designs that align with Jake's often unrelenting critique. The insidious nature of manipulation lies in these subtle shifts that warp self-perception and breed compliance. While Charlotte initially embraced her unique aesthetic, she eventually second-guessed every decision and clung desperately to Jake's feedback as a lifeline. This profound transformation stifled her growth, as creative blocks solidified under the pressure of constant scrutiny. Victims are often drawn into a mental maze, darting between moments of false hope and despair, convinced that further alignment with the manipulator will lead them back to a sense of equilibrium. Building resilience against manipulation necessitates a multifaceted approach, primarily focused on nurturing a strong sense of self-worth and clarity about personal values. As emotional turmoil mounts within a manipulative relationship, victims must employ strategies to reclaim their identity and foster strength that withstands psychological obstacles. Salient practitioners suggest the importance of cultivating a solid support network, surrounding oneself with individuals who offer genuine encouragement and who can provide reality checks when manipulative dynamics threaten to engulf one's perspective. Aware of their innate abilities and perspectives, victims can begin to construct boundaries, even in the most densely woven depths of inviting manipulation. Disrupting the circular path of dependency instigates a monumental shift, allowing victims to reevaluate opportunities through a new lens, one that prioritizes acknowledgement of their value. By embracing open communication about their experiences and pursuing therapy or counseling, individuals can fortify emotional defenses and illuminate patterns they had previously overlooked. Through these constructive measures, rebuilding emotional strength becomes pivotal in response to manipulation. Understanding the dynamics at play is essential, enabling victims not only to identify their worth, but also to counteract attempts to distort their reality. By recognizing when manipulation seeps into interactions, individuals can initiate proactive responses that prevent feeling ensnared in cycles of compliance. As we move forward, this chapter invites you into deeper reflections and actionable strategies aimed at building psychological resilience against manipulation. In the next portion, we will elaborate on creating firm emotional boundaries and how these tools can solidify one's mental fortitude in navigating relationships marked by insidious control. Awareness and preparedness act as shields, empowering you to assert your autonomy and liberate your potential. The impact of psychological manipulation extends far beyond mere interactions. It seeps into the core of a victim's emotional state, profoundly influencing their decision-making, relationships, and self-esteem. As Charlotte navigated her relationship with Jake, the emotional whirlwind she experienced began to erode her confidence. Initially brimming with creativity, she increasingly doubted her worth, questioning her capabilities at every turn. Victims often become ensnared in a trope of differing emotions, crafting a reality where panic and despair are mingled with fleeting doses of affection. This unpredictability feeds into a cycle where the victim clings to manipulative affirmations, further damning their sense of worth and autonomy. Research by Dr. Margot Sutherland outlines how emotional manipulation can lead to diminished cognitive functions, explaining that individuals subjected to chronic emotional distress are less capable of logical reasoning and decision-making. As their self-esteem plummets, they start to perceive reality through a lens that is skewed by survival instincts rather than authentic feelings. Charlotte's decision-making process, originally infused with creativity and autonomy, became a shadowy reflection of Jake's opinions. Armed with his critiques, she increasingly adopted a consensus mindset, aligning her creative output with what she thought would be deemed inferior. Every deviation from Jake's expectations led to crippling self-doubt, further fueling a destructive feedback loop. Manipulation's most alarming consequence resonates through relationships, transforming healthy interactions into platforms for control. Friends and family members often lament the loss of their once vibrant Charlotte, who now distances herself from their encouragement since Jake consistently paints these loved ones as antagonistic to her success. This closeness to a manipulative partner often manifests as isolation, as emotional ties weaken under the weight of the partner's disapproval. Not only does the victim's world shrink, but the intrinsic bond between individual autonomy and social connection frays, leaving behind an emptiness that once fulfilled lives. Why, then, do people fall prey to such underhanded dynamics? Rooted in the human psyche is the deep-seated need for connection and validation. When charm veils ulterior motives, many individuals overlook red flags. The allure of a connection, a desire fulfilled, can warp judgment, constraining the victim into rationalizing behaviors that are paradoxically damaging to their emotional well-being. This rationalization often comes from cognitive dissonance experienced by victims, how they internalize opposing feelings, vacillating between love for the manipulator and the recognition of subtle manipulation, fearing the risk of emotional loss. Recognizing these symptoms demands vigilance. The ability to take a step back and analyze personal experiences governs future decisions. Encouraging tales from individuals who have emerged from manipulative experiences lends credence to the need for self-awareness. Take Nicole, who once found solace in a friendship that masked manipulative tactics, leading to years of emotional turmoil. Only upon recognizing the dismantling of her self-worth did Nicole begin to reestablish her life with healthy boundaries. Understanding how manipulation manifests is critical in nurturing resilience. Conditional affirmations and constant emotional regulation lead to fragility and self-doubt. Breaking free from these chains demands awareness of emotional health. Engaging with self-reflective practices like journaling or therapy bolsters the confidence needed to discern judgment. As we navigate this complex landscape, it is essential to explore the hidden warning signs often overlooked in relationships heavily laced with manipulation. Undertones of confusion and societal pressures can easily mask manipulative behaviors, leading to victimization, necessitating an informed approach. The next segment will reveal these concealed indicators, further guiding readers towards strategies that not only illuminate these red flags, but empower them to reclaim their autonomy and strength amidst emotional confusion. Understanding these signs spells the difference between clarity and compulsion, forging pathways toward healthier relationships. Manipulators are often astute in their ability to identify potential targets, using various psychological tactics to hone in on vulnerabilities that can be easily exploited. They employ observation and social understanding, honing in on individuals who exhibit signs of insecurity, loneliness, or a need for validation. For instance, consider Lisa, a recent college graduate navigating the world of corporate employment. Struggling to find her footing in the competitive environment, she becomes a prime target for John, a charismatic yet calculative colleague. John quickly observes Lisa's eagerness to impress and her understated self-confidence, a combination that presents a fertile landscape for manipulation. By offering mentorship under the guise of friendly support, he gains Lisa's trust while simultaneously knitting invisible threads of control around her decision-making. As Lisa confides in John about her challenges and aspirations, he strategically leverages this personal information to manipulate her actions. Charismatic individuals like John often know just how to position themselves as essential allies, offering help while deriving satisfaction from the vulnerability they exploit. In one situation, Lisa presents a project idea she believes in, only for John to shoot it down during a meeting with exaggerated critiques, painting Lisa's work as naive and ill-conceived. Observing Lisa's stunned silence and subsequent self-doubt, John solidifies his control over the situation. Gradually, Lisa learns to cede opinions, conditioned to seek his approval before expressing ideas, showcasing how subtle shifts can manifest through a cycle of manipulation. This dynamic manifests as a series of psychological changes within the victim. Lisa, once vocal and passionate, begins to harbor fears of inadequacy as John's criticisms overshadow her self-worth. In a poignant case of projection, Lisa reflects her fears onto her performance, allowing John's manipulation to eclipse her autonomy. Here, cognitive dissonance thrives. While part of her recognizes John's deceit, her longing for validation leads her to downplay her talents and accept his warped version of reality. Consequently, she begins to associate John's self-interested feedback with genuine concern, allowing his influence to infiltrate her thought processes and convert her perspective. The process of emotional manipulation breeds compliance and complicity, rendering victims more susceptible to further control. Lisa finds herself caught in spirals of approval, constantly seeking John's guidance, believing she needs his affirmation to succeed. This norm of dependency erodes decision-making prowess, showcasing how skillful manipulators transform confident individuals into puppets steering away from their original course. Lisa's increasing isolation from her peers who attempt to uplift her only intensifies the grip John maintains, illustrating the multi-leveled approach manipulators adopt to dismantle support networks. Recognizing these traits, how manipulators discern targets and exploit vulnerabilities, is vital for anyone embarking on understanding emotional manipulation. By bringing these dynamics to light, victims can begin to see themselves distinctively and cultivate defenses against encroaching emotional control. It becomes crucial to instill self-awareness, evaluate personal experiences with a discerning eye, and learn to trust one's instincts. Knowledge and recognition empower individuals, offering sanctuary from the psychological spirals of exploitation. As we advance through this exploration of manipulation, the next section will branch into the escalation of control, detailing how manipulative dynamics deepen over time and how victims may become trapped within these cycles of dependence. Identifying the evolution of control builds an essential foundation for understanding and breaking free when ensnared in such entrapments, allowing readers to cultivate a stronger sense of autonomy and agency in their lives. Awareness is the first step toward developing resilience against admonitions of manipulative behaviors, transforming vulnerabilities into strengths that fortify self-worth in the face of emotional deception. Understanding these principles not only illuminates the path to recovery, but also arms individuals with the insight needed to pursue genuine connections and navigate life's complexities. Chapter 5: Setting Boundaries Without Guilt. Imagine being in a vibrant social setting, surrounded by laughter and meaningful conversations, yet feeling an insidious pressure seeping into your consciousness. In the corner of the room is Mark, the ever-charming extrovert who appears to have mastered the art of connecting with everyone around him. But hidden behind his easy laughter and quick wit is a nuanced agenda: the systematic undermining of personal boundaries. His goal is to achieve emotional control over those he engages with, subtly manipulating friends and acquaintances into fulfilling his needs while disregarding their own. Whether through charisma, flattery, or emotional appeals, Mark deftly plays the innocent card, creating an environment where compliance is expected and individual perspectives diluted. Victims of such psychological strategies often remain unaware of their entrapment until their needs, beliefs, and even identities have been shaped to fit the mold someone else has created. Take Jessica, a young marketing professional, as a powerful illustration of this plight. Initially, Jessica savors the camaraderie of the group and appreciates Mark's seemingly genuine interest in her thoughts. Over time, however, Mark's conversation redirects from inclusive inquiries into insidious demands masked as favors. What begins as a casual request to borrow ideas for a project turns into frequent exchanges where Jessica feels compelled to compromise her own creative instincts. Consciously, she delights in the attention, but unconsciously, the cracks begin to form in her self-assurance. Mark, navigating their interactions like a skilled puppeteer, subtly sows doubt through comments cloaked in misguided concern. Manifesting this behavior allows him to enforce a dynamic where Jessica increasingly overlooks her own discomfort, all in the name of friendship. As Jessica's interaction with Mark progresses, her innate boundaries erode, and the psychological ramifications become stark. Feeling the constant need to please, Mark leads her to neglect her time and passions, causing her to accept requests and pressure willingly. Perhaps a deadline is fast approaching, yet when Mark calls for a brainstorming session at the last moment, Jessica falters and prioritizes his needs over her own. What Jessica initially perceives as compassion will ultimately reshape her decision-making dynamics, crafting a culture of guilt attributed to saying no. The truth appears muddled. Her compliance shields Mark's growing patterns of emotional manipulation, while further alienating her from her own aspirations and support systems. While some might criticize Jessica for being passive, psychological research reflects an alarming reality. Many individuals grapple with setting boundaries due to deeply rooted fears of rejection or feelings of inadequacy. This reliance on external validation can transform into a tragic cycle, where individuals continually sacrifice their needs for fitting into the narratives perpetuated by manipulators. Mark's actions amplify guilt, hijacking Jessica's autonomy with his charismatic guise, leaving her increasingly uncertain of her self-worth. Acknowledging this dynamic is crucial for unraveling the ties that bind individuals in subconscious compliance within toxic relationships. Comprehending how emotional manipulation blurs boundaries reveals the urgency of cultivating the courage to establish personal limits without succumbing to guilt. True independence stems from understanding that friendships should be reciprocal and empowering, not tethered to guilt and emotional strings. As we move forward in this chapter, the need to explore establishing and asserting personal boundaries becomes paramount. Understanding the art of boundary setting while diverting guilt dramatically reconceptualizes the framework of healthy relationships. By recognizing scenarios woven with manipulation, readers can begin claiming their autonomy from emotional demands injunctioned by others. Ultimately, the growth lies in reclaiming one's narrative, instilling the strength forged through reflection, and advancing toward empowering actions. The next segment will delve further into effective strategies for setting boundaries, equipping you with the tools needed to navigate complex social dynamics with confidence and clarity. Awareness acts as the foundation upon which resilient self-advocacy is built, guiding you toward relationships rooted in mutual respect and understanding. The inability to set boundaries can deeply affect emotions, decision-making, relationships, and self-esteem, creating a complex tapestry of entanglement that many individuals feel helpless to escape. For Jessica, the marketing professional who became entrapped in her relationship with Mark, the ramifications of failing to assert her boundaries began to play out emotionally. Initially, she experienced anxiety and guilt each time she felt pressured to meet Mark's demands. The sheer weight of feeling unable to decline his requests led to a psychological strain that manifested as tension in her everyday life. This chronic stress further cultivated a fear of conflict, deterring her from communicating her needs confidently. As her emotions spiraled, so did the ripples of doubt circumscribing her decisions. Moreover, the erosion of self-esteem becomes increasingly apparent when personal boundaries elude recognition. Jessica's repeated compliance with Mark's overwhelming demands led her to internalize feelings of inadequacy. Research indicates that individuals entwined in manipulative relationships often measure their worth based on their ability to please others, leading to a distorted sense of self. Psychologist Dr. Karen Horney articulated that this external focus hampers one's self-concept, complicating the likelihood of self-advocacy. Jessica, succumbing to the belief that her ideas lack merit without Mark's endorsement, marked her self-esteem with a concerning reliance on validation from others. Cognitive dissonance undoubtedly contributes to this cycle, as she struggles to reconcile her worth with the voice of the manipulator constantly undermining her. In relationships, lacking boundaries creates an environment ripe for continuing cycles of dependency and emotional exploitation. As Jessica withdrew from her social circles out of guilt for not meeting Mark's needs, her sense of isolation deepened, strangling her support network. Research by Dr. John Gottman on relationship dynamics confirms that manipulators exploit perceived deficits in a person's social capital, leading them to feel misplaced in their connections. Friends they once could rely on may now seem overwhelming or unsupportive, pushing individuals into a spiral of toxic dependency marked by emotional uncertainty. Why do so many people like Jessica fall prey to emotional manipulation? The root often lies in a complex interplay of psychological factors: a deep-seated fear of disapproval, a desire for acceptance, and psychological conditioning tracing back to childhood experiences. Many individuals unlearn the value of asserting one's own needs early on, reinforcing notions of compliance as a primary means of social belonging. This concept aligns with research by Dr. Brené Brown, who found that individuals who struggle with shame are often unable to express their boundaries, tightening the hold manipulators have over them. Understanding the implications of boundary setting is essential for both self-defense and emotional liberation. The ability to recognize the gradual yet devastating impact of not asserting boundaries becomes a tool for restoration. For Jessica, seeking the support of willing friends or engaging with a professional therapist formed the cornerstone for her journey toward reclaiming autonomy. Engaging in self-reflection and exercising assertiveness techniques can slowly unearth the buried self-respect and self-worth that diminish with continued compliance. As this section closes, consider how the journey of setting boundaries leads to empowerment rather than hopelessness. Creating healthy boundaries facilitates more genuine relationships rooted in mutual respect and understanding. In forthcoming discussions, we will explore common warning signs of manipulation often overlooked in interpersonal dynamics. Illuminating these actionable signals can arm individuals with the knowledge needed to reclaim their autonomy and foster a life free from undue emotional burdens. Understanding these subtleties lays the groundwork for creating reciprocal relationships that nurture rather than deplete one's emotional reserves. Empowerment initiates the process of healing, allowing individuals to rewrite outdated scripts that no longer serve them as they embark on a path toward healthier connections. Manipulators are adept at identifying their targets through keen observation and psychological insight. They search for individuals who exhibit vulnerability, often looking for traits like low self-esteem, a desire for approval, or social isolation. For instance, in Jessica's scenario, her recent transitions in life, starting a new job and navigating friendships, made her an appealing target for Mark. He recognized her eagerness to fit in and capitalize on those aspirations, tapping into her need for validation. This fundamental understanding of Jessica's vulnerabilities allowed Mark to establish a rapport that felt supportive, when in actuality it served as a harbor for manipulation. As the relationship developed, the tactics used by manipulators like Mark become increasingly subtle yet effective. Mark began by expanding the emotional reliance that Jessica had naturally formed. Each compliment or rendered favor layered a sense of obligation that twisted the boundary between gratitude and dependency. Psychological principles reveal that individuals who are emotionally invested in a relationship will often overlook warning signs or tolerable discomfort, believing that enduring distant behaviors equates to loyalty. This perspective aligns with a significant concept in social psychology called the reinforcement effect, where initial positive interactions overshadow growing negative dynamics. As Jessica navigated her increasingly troubling relationship, she experienced small, yet accumulative shifts in her emotional landscape. When Mark critiqued her ideas during meetings, her instinct was to please him and court his approval. Instead of advocating for her creative vision, which thrived before their alliance, Jessica began to question her capabilities completely. The psychological shift marked a timeline of disheartening compliance that led her to sacrifice her individuality in favor of keeping peace, a marked characteristic of manipulation that is often sidelined as merely a flaw by the victim. In essence, these patterns materialize irregularly over time, evident through how Jessica becomes increasingly tangled within Mark's web of control. As she simultaneously seeks acceptance from him while feeling constricted by compliance, an internal conflict brews. Instead of voicing her ideas assertively, she stays silent when they clash with Mark's vision, reinforcing the misconception that her opinions hold lesser value. Cognitive dissonance compels her to rationalize this behavior as noble. Her fears of upsetters outweigh the desire for personal expression. As a study by psychologist Leon Festinger explains, enduring conflicting beliefs creates discomfort that victims often settle into by internally alleviating their needs. The core strategies manipulators employ foster this dependency on emotional gratification and reinforce an unbalanced dynamic. These tactics illuminate how manipulative forces can warp one's reality and create conditions ripe for further exploitation. The unseen damage they inflict blossom from weak boundaries, allowing manipulators to entrench themselves firmly within the lives of their victims. Experiences such as Jessica's demonstrate that individuals frequently chose to conform to someone else's narrative instead of challenging dynamics that diminish their worth. Understanding how manipulators identify targets and exploit emotional weaknesses is a critical first step toward individual resistance. Ingraining self-awareness fosters a defense mechanism against these pervasive tactics. As readers reflect on Jessica's experiences, recognizing similar patterns in their own lives, they may start developing a framework that promotes setting and enforcing boundaries without guilt. Knowledge serves as a protective measure against emotional manipulation, shifting the locus of control back to the individual rather than granting it to those who strive to exploit weaknesses. As we delve deeper into the next section, we will examine the escalation of control within manipulative relationships, exploring how victims gradually find themselves ensnared in abusive cycles. Recognizing the growth of manipulation not only empowers individuals, but also equips them with strategies to reclaim autonomy and process their emotional entanglements with clarity and strength. Understanding these developments promises liberation from the grasp of manipulation, ultimately guiding readers toward healthier, more fulfilled relational constructs built on mutual respect and understanding. Chapter 6. Embracing Real Love, Not Illusion. Picture a picturesque cafe on a sunny afternoon, where laughter and soft conversations intermingle with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee. Rachel sits at a table, absorbed in a heartwarming exchange with Ryan, a handsome, charming man who seems generous with his affection. Initially, their connection feels electric, igniting within Rachel a sense of euphoria she never thought possible. But over time, shadows begin to creep into their interactions. Unbeknownst to Rachel, Ryan's ultimate goal is emotional exploitation, cleverly disguising his manipulative tendencies beneath a veneer of romance and care. What begins as charming flirtation subtly morphs into controlling behaviors, calculated compassion, and emotional strings that bind Rachel closer to him, making her oblivious to the manipulation that increasingly defines their relationship. As their romance unfolds, Ryan employs tactics that fuel Rachel's insecurities, cleverly diverting attention from his intentions. He begins with pestering questions and mixed messages. "Why were you out so late?" Or, "Did he make you laugh more than I do?" Each delivered with false affection that chips away at her self-esteem. At first, Rachel interprets this as concern reinforced by love and attachment, However, it soon blossoms into a cycle of doubt and reliance within Rachel. Ignoring or failing to comprehend the stranglehold Ryan's shadowy demands place over her, she embarrasses herself by renouncing other important passions and friendships in the name of preserving their bond. Rachel soon finds herself torn between the intoxicating highs of affection and intoxicating lows of doubt created by Ryan's manipulation, a consequence of this romantic illusion. Victims, lost in such emotional landscapes, frequently struggle to see beyond the initial charm. The often misguided belief that true love involves compromise births complying behaviors that rattle the foundation of their self-worth. Ryan's manipulation tugs at Rachel's emotional strings, luring her to equate affection with submission. Underneath the appealing cloak of romance rests a bedrock of insidious control. Victims like Rachel become willingly entrapped within the illusion of love, while overlooking the glaring inconsistencies that raise caution. Yet these dynamics stem from more than mere willful blindness. The interdependence created by emotional manipulation thrives on deeply rooted human needs. People yearn for connection, validation, and love, making them susceptible to deception by those skilled in courting approval. Psychological studies indicate that prominent features seen in manipulative relationships include confirmation bias, where victims come to accept discrepancies between perceived affection and real intentions. Rachel chooses to ignore the discomfort because Ryan's affection seems heavenly, even when navigationally grounded in a descent toward dependence. Understanding these patterns is crucial for uncovering hidden truths about love and relationships. Recognizing when compassion morphs into emotional control arms the victim for contemplation over heartfelt entanglements. Rachel's experiences serve as a cautionary tale, illustrating the thin line that weaves between affection and domination, prompting imperative reflection for those entwined in similar situations. Each revelation brings clarity as victims begin to question whether they deserve a connection built on authentic value rather than illusory affection. As the chapter progresses, the focus will shift toward embracing the essence of real love, emphasizing the pursuit of relationships grounded in mutual respect, honesty, and autonomous partnership. Recognizing the fundamental split between authentic love and the deceptive allure of manipulation serves as a vital defense mechanism against entrapment. It announces the journey toward emotional liberation as a pathway to reclaiming one's true self amidst complexities fostered by unrealistic expectations. Preparing to embrace genuine love requires the courage to dismantle illusions, equipping oneself to heal and fortify the strength necessary to design flourishing relationships that honor personal integrity over the trappings of deceit. The emotional toll of manipulative relationships, such as the one Rachel experiences with Ryan, reverberates through multiple aspects of her life, leaving scars on her self-esteem and distorting her decision-making processes. Initially, the thrill of romance can overshadow her ability to recognize the signs of emotional manipulation. Though Rachel is bright and ambitious, her burgeoning relationship catalyzes a disquieting shift. Each act of emotional exploitation soothes her sense of agency, stifling her autonomy while reinforcing dependencies that obscure her original self. As Rachel finds herself entangled in Ryan's web of charm, masking control, her emotions fluctuate wildly, flitting between ecstatic highs when he showers her with affection and harrowing lows when his piercing questions and veiled criticisms surface. Psychologically, this roller coaster creates an addictive cycle, as Dr. Tina Tessina emphasizes in her work on emotional health, where victims may become innately conditioned to seek reassurance from their manipulators. When Rachel longs for Ryan's affection in challenging moments, a crutch forms that keeps her yearning for intimacy solely from him, compounding her isolation. The distortion of these emotional dynamics compromises her mental health, creating an internal conflict that leads her to dismiss her initial instincts in favor of validation. This emotional dependency negatively influences Rachel's decision-making, sowing confusion in her judgment as she grows uncertain of her needs. Time and again, she complies with Ryan's whims, ignoring friend invitations or professional opportunities that predated their relationship, rationalizing that her sacrifices solidify their bond. Psychological research echoes this reality, illustrating how emotional manipulation fosters habitual compliance, effectively redirecting the victim's choices from personal growth entirely to serving the desires of the manipulator. Each time Rachel succumbs to self-neglect and refrains from pursuing her passions, she furthers the disconnect between her true self and a version shaped by Ryan's expectations. Moreover, the erosion of self-esteem intensifies as the relationship unfolds. Once a confident individual, Rachel begins to tie her identity intrinsically to Ryan's validation. Through a series of overt and covert dismissals, she sees her worth as contingent upon his perceptions. By diminishing her accomplishments and countering her insights, Ryan tightens his grip, leading Rachel to view herself through a distorted lens. This external locus of self-worth tragically depersonalizes Rachel's achievements and reinforces the belief that she is less deserving of authentic love and respect. Understanding these emotional and psychological ramifications needs urgent attention, as they reinforce a toxic cycle that affects those similarly ensnared in relationships purported to be love. Rachel's story exposes a painful yet relatable reality: the way emotionally manipulators can warp self-perception, decision-making, and interpersonal connections into something that bears little resemblance to healthy dynamics. Detaching emotions from a manipulative relationship opens the door to recognizing one's inherent value, offering a vital pathway to regain agency. As we progress, uncovering the hidden warning signs of manipulation becomes increasingly important. Informing oneself about behaviors that slip through the cracks can enhance awareness and ultimately facilitate self-protection. In the next section, we will delve into these subtle indicators that often escape notice but can signal deceptive behaviors in relationships. Awareness nurtures defenses against manipulation, forging anew a commitment to seeking, nurturing, and sustaining genuine love that honors authentic being and personal integrity over the distortions of false attachment. Understanding these signals positions individuals to reclaim their power, leading to healthier relationships infused with respect and understanding, firmly rooting oneself in the reality of true connection. Manipulators are often adept at identifying potential targets, using keen observance to discern vulnerabilities that can be exploited. They focus on individuals who display signs of insecurity or a desperate need for validation. For example, consider Sarah, a recent college graduate who is thrilled to begin her professional journey but struggles with self-doubt. Rick, an older colleague in her office, quickly notices her eagerness to please, as well as the lack of confidence in her skills. With a charming smile and an air of sophistication, he draws Sarah into his orbit, initially presenting himself as a mentor. His apparent generosity masks a more sinister agenda, establishing emotional control over Sarah and ensuring her compliance to fulfill his needs. Rick begins their relationship with friendly overtures and gentle encouragement, effectively building a connection that makes Sarah feel supported. However, when he later provides critical feedback on her work, it is infused with a condescending approach, wrapped in perceived kindness. "I know you have great ideas, Sarah, but maybe try to think things through before presenting them. It would make a better impression." Such comments chip away at her confidence, and what starts as constructive criticism soon spirals into emotional manipulation. Sarah begins to feel as though her ideas are inferior, and any hesitation leads her to seek Rick's opinion before contributing at all. An all too common psychological shift where the victim starts to question their own thoughts and talent. The tactics employed by manipulators like Rick lead to subtle yet profound shifts in the victim's psyche. Sarah finds herself shaped by Rick's expectations, as her identity increasingly becomes entwined with the validation she seeks from him. This reliance opens the door to cognitive dissonance, creating an inner conflict. She craves Rick's approval while simultaneously feeling frustrated and undeveloped, a struggle apparent in her decision-making process. Decisions that once flowed easily start to feel laden with doubt and uncertainty, as she constantly weighs her thoughts against Rick's expectations. Over time, this dependency hampers her ability to act independently, diminishing her autonomy and sense of self. The implications of these manipulative behaviors extend beyond merely affecting emotions. They disrupt key relationships surrounding the victim through isolation. By subtly discouraging Sarah from engaging with her friends or professional peers, Rick prepares the ground for a toxic bond where she feels she has no one else to turn to except him. The chilling effect of such emotional control has been examined in psychological studies, underscoring that manipulators often thrive by eroding the victim's existing support systems and enforcing compliance through a masquerade of care. Understanding how manipulators identify their targets and execute these psychological strategies is crucial for self-defense and to prevent such entrapment. Each individual needs to instill self-awareness, recognizing one's value independent of the manipulator's influence. Practical steps involve establishing boundaries with assertiveness, fostering emotional intelligence, and cultivating support networks that offer genuine encouragement. In conclusion, this book has navigated the intricate landscape of psychological manipulation, shedding light on the tactics employed by manipulators, the impact of emotional control on individuals, and the importance of establishing healthy boundaries. By unearthing these patterns, we empower ourselves to recognize unhealthy dynamics in relationships and embrace authentic connections built on mutual respect and understanding. Understanding manipulation is the first step toward reclaiming autonomy and fostering emotional resilience. Thank you for dedicating your time to explore these vital insights. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe to Stealth Psychology for further content that supports your journey to empowerment and self-awareness.